Oh.
Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining our professional development webinar series today on how to manage risk in development project at early stage. We appreciate all of you for taking time off your busy schedules to join us today. Later, towards the very end of this event, we hope all information we have lined up for you to be fruitful and engaging. To avoid any noise interference, your microphone has been muted. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the question box on your right, and we will answer it at the end of the presentation. As for today's sharing session, it will be conducted by our Chief Marketing Officer, Surveyor Desmond Loy. Desmond was previously a quantity surveyor with 10 years experience, and a part of being a CMO in BuildSpace, he is also a lecturer in Taylor's University, teaching measurement in BEAM as well as supervising research theses. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Desmond to begin our agenda for today.
Thank you, Kila, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Desmond. I decided to actually turn off my webcam just because last session, then we tend to have my face show, and together with the videos, and we got some feedback saying because of the bandwidth, then it somehow affect the quality of the videos. Then it has been playing. So today, if you don't mind, then I hope you give me the permission to not show face, but I will still explain on the presentation slide and then on the details of along the way we go through. So today we'll be talking about how to manage project risk in development projects at the early stage. This title actually came to me when we designed our conference material for Red Dot event in past 2 months. Then I believe for those who actually joined us for the previous session, we talk about profitability, because when it comes to risk, then it always tied up to the profitability of contractors. But today we'll be also talking about how to manage risk and how would it affect the way we work, more from a developer's perspective. So we can have this tied up back to back, and then we will see the entire scope of discussion will be on how to use technology and also how to go digitalization and to help us to work in a more efficient way. So as for today afternoon, we'll be still starting from welcome introduction. I will be talking about a little bit about a background on the subject matter itself. And we will also talk about what are the risks in development projects. We won't be talking about a developer's business in overall, but we will be focusing on the project level. And along the way, we'll be also talking about identifying and how to mitigate those kind of risks, and to put up some data and statistics that we researched and want to share with you all. Then we will proceed with conclusion and also closing. So we will start with to discuss on in real estate development. Then it will be more like an income generated commodity, and therefore when it comes to the risk for development project or developers, it will be discussed from the aspect of business. It will be discussed about economics, finance. But as far as projects are concerned, then we might want to talk about risk and how risk can actually influence project from every project stage. It will be coming from a conceptual design stage. It will be also happenings in project feasibility analysis when it comes to acquiring a little bit more information to see how feasible our project is, and also design and planning, bidding and tendering stage, all the way to construction, execution, or even handover stage. So the risk that we have, the risk management that we want to talk about right here is actually an ongoing and interactive processes, because it will not only affect the way how we look at our return on investment, but it will also affect the way we manage our project performances. Not to mention in relation to risk, like we always have in our construction project, like to separate our design from construction, then the lack of integration in our consultant teams and project team, poor communications and uncertainties lie ahead to 2 or 3 years down the road, changing environment and also increased project complexity, and also economy changes like what we are having right now here in Malaysia, like the lockdown thing, and it will all affect our ROI in terms of financially and also our reputation sometimes. Yeah. So we want to introduce the state factors, which is a short form for the factors of risk when we consider in terms of social, technological, economical, environmental, and political. But since today, the way the scope of discussion will be focused on project itself, then it will be more on technological and economical in terms of dollars and cents. We want to share with you this top 10 risks that faced by a real estate development, real estate client, or we call it developer in our construction industry that we usually term it. The list is from Cloud Chart, but I will want to explain it in the way we always understand. The first one that this website lists out is actually the final project cost waiting, who is always exceed the project budget. So this is how being reflected in the usual ROI that we always talk about, and this is has been mitigated by the way we phase our project. But if we also want to talk about what is the reason that lies beneath the risk, is probably the budget is always incorrect or inaccurate, or there will be changes and variations, there will be changes in our project scope, or even sometimes unexpected site conditions that will be also one of the risks under this category. The second one is the project is always delayed. That will also cause the client not only gets their project late, which means there will be also delay in profit generating or the revenue recouping. There will be also the possibility where the client tends to pay more for administration cost, for and the image and reputations. When we talk about adverse weather, I highlighted in orange color. That means it might not be so relevant in the context of Malaysia, because we are so blessed and fortunate that our climate is quite stable. The most we want to talk about is probably just the project that we have in eastern coast like Kelantan, like Terengganu, where we have monsoon season like Sarawak and Sabah, with certain areas that we have. Otherwise, we were quite stable and quite predictable climate and weather here. But when it comes to shortage of resources, it's something that he does in 2017, where there is a shortage of labor, that we will encounter. But lately, we do also find out from my friends when they are managing some of the project, they do tell me that certain project has been affected by this COVID-19 issues because of some M&E equipments, especially like chillers, then they won't be able to get it from Denmark. The shipments from Japan and China and Chile are being stopped. So the shortage of resources could be one of the risks that we have in development project. The fifth one that the website lists out is contractor that does not perform, that will also lead to poor quality of work, and also a defect-prone product and delay sometimes, that will also lead us to take a look at a project that doesn't perform as required. This is usually not quite related to a project planning itself, but it will be more on the way the scope of work has been drafted and the design has been put up. So it might not form part of the discussion today. Next one is poor public perception of the project as one of the risks by a developer, especially when we're going to develop a land where the livelihood of the people that stayed around there will be affected, or there will be also some environmental issues that been pop up. So it is also part of the external factors that we will not be discussing today. But we will also look at how we can actually mitigate the risk when there is poor safety, where it is always linked to a stop work order. Take, for example, if there's something happen on the site, on how can we manage it and also reduce it on the documentation by putting in something more solid in our documentations. This website also lists down the 9 risks that we have here as called, they term it as incurring unnecessary costs for the project. But I will also want to explain this point by the way we look at it as a dispute that arises during the post-contract stage. I will explain it from this angle to later towards the second half of this part. And last but not least, we have a major contractor, the supplier becoming bankrupt. And these are the risks can be also mitigate from the way we select our contractors or even manage our payment and to contractors promptly. And these are some of the factors in the highlighted in blues. Those are the risks that can be mitigated at the early stage. So the first question I want to share with you today is when this whole content or presentation been decided, then we always want to put out this question and then to discuss with our friends. We will have to take a look at the issues that do we still need BQ. Now the fun fact of BQ is this BQ has been used back in 300 years ago in somewhere in 1774, if I'm not mistaken. I got it online. It's quite interesting. And it's actually even older than the Egyptian pyramid that we have. So, but nowadays, there are technologies and attempt to replace the need for BQ over the years, especially it started when Malaysia construction industry is talking about building information modeling back in year 2009. That was the time when I started work. And especially also they are more and more new procurement arrangement. But all this year, as we were serving our clients and as developer, when I was still a QS, then most of our job, I would say, we will still be looking at the use of BQ as part of the contract administrative tool. The reason being is that if we take a look at the formulas that we put up on the screen right here, when we say cost equals to quantities and rates, and we also want to talk about saying if a development project in the context of development project where the cost is the fundamental thing we want to take a look, and there's nothing more than a BQ. There's nothing more appropriate to use a BQ where these are all these components in a BQ to tell you what are the costs will look like by the time we price it properly, and also what are the scope of work. When the cost and scope of work is very much confirmed, then we can actually tell the time that's spent for producing such a product will be quite definite. So since the upcoming webinar that we have in next Tuesday, I'll be talking in detail on how to use a BQ and how to produce a BQ in in construction stage, especially pre-contract stage and post-contract stage. So for today, I will be going into detail for this part. But the only interesting part I want to share with you is this site progress planning in the pre-contract stage. That is not very usual that happens in Malaysia, but I will tell you from certain research that we have done and certain project experience and that I have encountered before, then to talk about what is actually the benefit of having it done in the pre-contract stage. So to quote what Ashford and Hawk was saying, he's saying, BQ by far is still something that provides the best basis for estimating tender comparison and contract administration. I believe we won't have a better argument to deny it or to say nah, no. But so far these arguments are still quite valid. But we want to look at the things from a different angle. Say, take for example, we do not want to use BQ. Now, we have project that doesn't really use BQ, then along the way we start to see how painful it was. Talk about the risk. It is actually very risky in terms of both time and cost, as what I had discussed earlier, because there is no basis of cost being compiled, and that also leads to a comparison where there's no longer an objective comparison criteria for selecting a more economic bid in that sense to be awarded. When it comes to post-contract stage, then it doesn't also allow us to have a basis for payments and claim. And worst come to worst, this is what was happening before in one of the project that I was handling is contractor tends to conspire then to submit a very high bid, and then we basically has nothing much we can do until a very late stage. So in pre-contract stage, in term of that, we have been highlighted right here for project costing, cost planning, and site progress planning. The first thing first we want to talk about is our PTE and cost plan. As far as PTE is concerned, which is a pre-tender estimate is concerned, as a QS, we usually only do it after the tender has been called. But we also want to look at the possibility on how can it be done before the tender being called. The reason being is that as soon as our BQ can be priced, then we should be able to know the component of the cost and also to see whether it tallies with the figures in our cost plan. So at least if there is correction plans or preventive actions need to be done in form of addendum, then at least we are still ahead of schedule to do it, and we still have ample of time to get it done. But the next thing, as what we had talked about it in our previous webinar, is on the cash flow projection. Maybe previous webinar when we talk about cash flow projection, it will be more from an angle from a contractor. But today we want to talk about from the angle of the developers. When we prepare the cost plan for some of the projects that we have, we tend to use percentage or a bit of weightage or a bit of assumptions to come out with the project cash flow, especially cash outflow in form of hard cost. Now, when we submit this tabulation of cash flow or hard cost to the client, so clients QS will use this one as a basis to top it up with their soft cost and then to present it to their management and start to compare with the cash inflow. So it in a way, we wouldn't say it's very, very accurate, but at some point of time, it will be some basis for some judgment, the decision to be made. But we also want to take a look at how it will affect our profit in terms of sales and marketing when this net profit has been considered on a quarterly or monthly basis. The next one is the work program projection. Again, we tend to let our tenderer to prepare us a work program projection in the form of Gantt chart during the tender submission. I personally been in those tender interview where the project manager actually prepared his own Gantt chart. Then all this consultant will sit in the tender interview, and then we will be comparing both Gantt chart, and then we start to analyze the gap in between and to identify the rooms for improvement. But we also been in those tender interviews where we just touch and go on this issue and let it wrap up. But the thing is, when we will have to look at the link of our work program to be done on site and to synchronize it to the cash flow projection we have prepared to get the stage payment from the bank, especially the time that we start to sell the house to the buyers. So having also said that, to have a more accurate the planning is, and to also have these three things being linked together on the basis of BQ, we might want to also look at our BQ in a different way in the future. So right here, I just want to share you as a quick recap on how BQ can be prepared and then pricing can be done in our BuildSpace. So this is the BQ this is the BQ page that we can see. Assuming that BQ has already been done and then all this quantity has already been put in, then we also want to take a look at how easily our pre-tender estimate can be established. There are libraries in BuildSpace we can use that is called schedule the rates. What we can do is just to link all these items to the rates that we have in our library. So as you can see from the screen right here, if we're coming in, there is some checkbox here for us to select some of the items and then to select the libraries that we want to link, the library rate that we want to link to. it's a bit lag from the screen that or from audience view, so I just try to slow down a little bit. So when we click import, then this rate will be straight away linked to a BQ description. So even if we have the same items in different parts of the BQs that we have, we can always use the same method. So once the pricing is done, there's this function called Project Analyzer. Last week, this Tuesday, we'll also talk about it. But as for comparing and also to studying in the component, the cost component and also the major quantities that we have, or even break down into the details in terms of BQ, then we can straight away know what is the difference in between our cost plan as compared to our budget and also BQ. Then in that sense, we can also dive into the detail to justify, to see that this kind of difference, the cost variance, would it be actually caused by the difference in market rates? That is the reason why we will say as soon as the BQ is done and right before the tender has been called or the BQ has been pushed out, it will be good if we have a price BQ to give us all this kind of information for some quick analysis of what we stand as compared to our cost plan and budget. So once the BQ is done, the pricing is done, then we might want to straight away quickly take a look at the work program and also the cash flow over the time. We'd like to share with you this quote by Association of Project Management. He's saying, project management is the process by which a projects are detailed, planned, monitored, controlled, and delivered. As far as how to mitigate the risk at the early stage, some of the things we might want to take a look is how we can detail our work and also plan the thing. Because basically what happens to in post-contract stage will be monitor, control, and towards the end of delivery, towards the end of the contract. So how detailed and planned that we can do will happen in the pre-contract stage. I would like to share with you a curve like this. This is what we got it from Project Control Academy. This is something that they call a banana curve. Now, if let's say and this is something that usually that worries our contract developer friends as well, because what happens in one of my friends' project was when the contractors submit a curve line like this, but actually what is actually happening right here is as shown as a red line. So although during the site meetings or during the post-contract stage, we can always ask contractor to to pick up and to mitigate the delays and so on and so forth. But since the momentum is there and since the basis of distribution sometimes is not correct, so it's a bit difficult for people to catch up in the sense, because we need to know also mostly in our architecture items and facade treatments and finishes and IDs and fit out, where the work done rate might be different, especially when it's staggered over different tower blocks. And sometimes due to the ways that QS, like me myself, the way we compose BQ as the way project manager understand the scope of work. So there will be a bit of difference in terms of interpretations and even preparation of this kind of curve. So it can be a quick recap to bring you all back again in this part of claim, where this is something that BuildSpace can still do with what with the BQ that we have. What we need to do is just to create a scope of work and then to tie it up to a BQ item as what we mentioned just now. So in this case, what we need to do is just to input all this productivity and also numbers of gangs and also the resources, then to read each and every BQ item, then to actually produce a work program as what you can see on the screen right here. So not only we're preparing a Gantt chart like this, but we do also generate some cash flow over the time to tell you what are the amounts of money that we need to get ready to be paid out to the contractors in this kind of format. So in that sense, then we will actually link our BQ and our cost and our quantities and our progress of work and also cash outflow together on the same basis right before the work has been awarded. So the next scope of work we want to discuss is about the tender documentation and its risk. We don't usually acknowledge the risk in tender documentation because we took it a bit lightly in a way. Allow me to put in this way, because even me myself, last time then when we were preparing a tender document, then we tend to copy and paste, and then the most we would do is to change a little bit of terms and prelims and also form of tender. But if based on what we have seen in the Journal of Sustainable Development, they actually risk out a lot of risk in tender documents, but we only put top 5 here to share with you. The first one is incomplete information on documents. And the second one is unrealistic drawings and plans that goes with the quantities and site conditions, additional scope of work, the changes in material and specification. If we take a look at item number 1, where incomplete information and documents, that might happen. We wouldn't say they will happen, but it did happen in 1 or 2 of my project if we use hard copy to send it out to our tenderer. Then we will discuss it in detail later. But we want to talk about saying that leads to a discussion whether our tender document is sufficient enough based on today's scenarios. The first one that we have is the SMM that we adopt. As most of the projects that we have, the tender document will be used as a basis in forming the contract documents. And if we have to acknowledge the fact that the contracts with BQ as a contract document will somehow limit the risk to both clients and contractor, and that is usually also governed by our COC. It conditions of contract like PAM, it can be FIDIC sometimes. But in Malaysia, for the projects that we have, we will usually use SMM2 as our standard of method measurement, and some of the projects are using MyCSM. So we want to discuss if, let's say, the different SMMs is adopted for different projects, and each standard of method of measurement has its own rules as to what is measured and to what is not, and also what is included in the item coverage and what is not. And most importantly, we want to take a look at where are those balance of risk of items such as, let's say, excavation, let's say our earthwork and support, let's say pilings, let's say temporary works, and also some other method related items like. So these are one of the things that we might want to look into when it comes to the style of the BQ and the description of the BQ that will eventually form part of the contracts. Second thing that we always have, I will use my term to call it a tender C, because in the BQ and the tender documents that we usually do, A is we call conforming design and conforming to clients' completion period. B is conforming design with contractors' proposed completion period. But tender C is always contractors' alternative design. We tend to have a lot of projects that feature elements of partial and complete contractor design, especially basement, pilings and parquets, and sometimes roof trusses and waterproofing systems. Sometimes that requires a careful consideration on how the work quantified and cost. At the same time, we also need to be very, very careful in the way we draft the terms and conditions at the very initial stage. And most likely in terms of developers' perspective, when you have a lot of projects that are handled by different QS consultants, we might also want to take a look on how can we standardize some of the clauses where you think it is very important to safeguard certain interests that we have, or to make sure that the quality of the project that we might get it out from. All right, so the next item we have, the scenarios, is the BEAM project, which is a new trend, and we know we have many developer friends here are looking into BEAM. But as far as documentation is concerned, it does also require a lot more details to supplement the BEAM model, and also to complete to put our requirements in detail so that people can actually understand and to agree on certain basis. Well, all these three scenarios that we have right here can all be standardized in form of in the form of BQ style, the form of tender, and even some of the mandatory requirements to form part of the submission, and later to be used as a contract binding to secure the best interest for both parties. So as far as standardization of documents is concerned, then we want to take a look at something we call a BQ library here. If it is possible for us to maintain a single site of BQ as consideration of this data from the perspective of developer to accumulate the data over time. So not only we can standardize the description of the scope of work, we can also accumulate the data in more systematic way. As far as project documents is concerned, then this is where, it lagged a little bit. Okay, as far as project documents is concerned, and this is where the consultant can actually start to store and exchange the project information for the work to be done, even from a planning stage. So a client can actually create a folder and decide who can come in, and the best thing of this thing right here is we can still maintain the proper record and also who actually upload this drawing. The use of forum will be a good alternative as compared to WhatsApp. WhatsApp is good for a quick reply, but it might no longer be a good option for discussion on project detail. If so has to be done, we can actually use in the forum where people can actually use it to keep all this information, and also all this record and conversation can be retained in a more systematic way. So all in all, it will be translated into our tender document, because the last thing that we fear the most is the completeness of the tender documents that we are about to pass to tender during the tender stage. In BuildSpace, we consolidate all these tender documents in one place, and this is to ensure every information that been passed to tenderers is actually the same. So what we can see on the screen now is that there will be a checklist on whatever thing that needs to be done as standardization of work process, part of the SOP that we want to have the completeness of the tender documentation before it has been sent out to the contractors. So come back to the top 10 biggest construction risk that are being faced by a client. So we'll do a quick recap for this top 10, but the one that I highlighted in red color will be very much related to contractors. That means the way we select the contractor can be also a way to mitigate the risk at the very early stage, like delay can be countered by a work program like what we had discussed. Same goes to shortage if we can discuss the procurement during tender stage. This is what we used to do, and I would say from my point of view, it was very, very fruitful and very, very beneficial to clients, especially to get to know some of the items we might need to have a longer lead time to be delivered to site. So the contractors that cannot perform, its performance can be evaluated by a technical submission and project experience. Safety can be dealt in safety measures and also PQP that presented during tender interviews. And also financial status can be also checked during the technical submission as well. So this is how a production of a list of tenderer can be be produced. As far as e-tender is concerned, right, we still want to focus on how much things can be done in one centralized system, in starting from selecting tenders and also expression of interest, and also to confirm a list of tender to be done online. So submissions has to be done online so that we can actually cut short our administrative time, and since time is money. So once the confirmation is done, then we want to proceed with tender invitation. We can still put in our tender invitation details right here, and then start to invite tenderers to join our tender by just sending out emails, rather than we call one by one, or we fax them like what we used to do. So as for tenders, when we got the tender invitation from clients, what contractor needs to do is just to firstly log into the system and start to download all the documents and drawings that we can also see the revision numbers and the dates. So from here, a tenderer or a contractor will be able to receive a complete document where there is no risk of missing information can happen in these situations. So as for pricing, as pricing is concerned, then the contractor can also use our BQ editor to quickly put in the rates they want to submit. And the best thing about this BQ is the one that you see the orange dot there, that will double click to come in. So all this line and are the trails of addendum. So with all this being done, it will definitely reduce the cost for tenders to participate in tender. Especially, we can probably look at how to bring down our documentation fees, and then to welcome more competitive bid in that sense. So once price is submitted, then we might also want to take a look at our tender summary. In BuildSpace, a submission or tender can be done as many times as you want, as long as this tender hasn't been closed. So a quick overview will allow us to know what is the spending and what is the overall costing that we had already submit to the client server. But we also want to take a look at this technical evaluation. This is what we call it a two-big system, where not only we're talking about commercial submission, but we also want to evaluate and give score to our contractors in terms of their technicality and also capabilities. And we will have them to submit their own scorings and also mandatory documents. And this is what needs to be done as part of the submission. So they can always upload the documents and then send it back to the client server. So what you have seen on the screen right now, if everything turns into green color, that means all the submissions is complete. So the beauty of e-tender in this case is we always say time equals to money. So based on some statistics that we found, they are reports that saying the time saving for time to procure will be reduced by 66%, and especially when it been translated into dollars and cents, they won't be actually a very significant figure, a very significant savings that we can actually straight away generate by snap of fingers. But some of the statistics is telling us, like the one that we're in London, when they are tender out jobs for the Olympic Games, and we have reports saying per tender in admin cost, the saving is about £1,005, and in the longer term, accumulatively, then we'll be talking about amount of in millions. So once it's done, then we might also want to take a look at how much time can be actually saved during the tender openings and tender comparisons as far as tender reporting is concerned. Now, as what we can see on the screen right here is tender scoring is automatically being computed. Oh, it lagged a little bit. So these points are given by the contractors itself based on a criteria that developer was set. So from here, we would know who fares in a more acceptable way. And the best thing is, as a consultant or superintending officer, we can still come in right here to further validate the submissions they have and also the qualifications they have way before we decide to open commercial submissions. So take for example, commercial submission has to be done, then it can be done online, and form of tender opening can also be done online. And here comes to the best part. I believe all the QS will start to say yes, finally, because the race comparison has been arranged side by side automatically. But we want to discuss about the functions right here using historical data later, because it is actually to allow the user to use the past project rates as a reference, especially if we have some similar ones or under one big development. So we can actually select those reference rates to be listed side by side to our comparison. Then it will give us a more objective feel, and then on to how to gauge what is the potential of saving when it comes to negotiations. So as for tender report comparison, then we can always select the entire thing and to be exported out to Excel and to print out to form part of our tender report. So once we open it up, then we can see the red color one is actually the rate which is on the high side, and the green color ones is the rate which is on the lower side as compared to average. Once it is done, then we also want to talk about how useful when it comes to system to produce a tender report and also at a recommendation for award. Because as you can see on the screen right here, there is something called award recommendation, where as a business unit or as a project manager or as a contract manager, then we will still be able to put all this information together in the web-based system or in your server or online to generate a report where your superior or top management and also your award committee will be able to look at it and then to start to verify the report and start to award. So in other words, it means that we not only the whole e-tender process for tender submission or tender preparation can be done in a very fast manner, but the most importantly is we want to see how much time we can actually save when it comes to tender comparison and how quickly we can get to know where do we stand, and then how fast we can react to certain thing which does not actually happen to what we were expecting. So this is what the beauty of e-tender is. So up next, it might be repeat right here. Okay, so sorry that the video was repeating just now, but now let's take a look at these numbers right here. We are about into the post-contract stage, and then these are the numbers we found from the start, and I believe some of you might have seen it. I believe some of you might not see it, but I am very excited to share with you on these numbers. We have 550,000, we have 440,000, we had 110,000, we have 200,000. Now, these numbers are what is happening in China, where we talk about online cases filed, online payment made, online court session held, online mediation conducted over the time where this outbreak of COVID-19 is happening. Within 47 days, within 47 days, those are the numbers of cases that happens on an average on daily basis. We're talking about the subject matter, the online litigations, and we know China has went way beyond us when it comes to cashless transaction back in 2000 and 2005. I roughly do a little bit of calculation, so we are 13 years, behind them. But since this online litigation has been happening so fast in this period of time, we might also want to take a look at how ready are we to adapt to from a physical litigation to online litigation when it comes to dispute resolution. It all ties to the disputes that the issues that dispute want to talk about, because by far construction is still one of the most dispute-ridden industry. And according to the annual Acadis Global Construction Dispute Report, and we'll talk about globally, in average, we will have a length of dispute resolution is about 17 months. Now, it's a bit long in a way, in terms of 17 months, but if we really put this into our average contract period, like 36 months, we'll be probably talking about almost half of the time during the contract stage, during the post-contract stage, we are dealing with dispute. So there are reports and also arguments, and researchers also point out that the disputes are caused by numerous reasons, but the primary causes include also the poor contract administration, and also the best way to mitigate this kind of risk, right, is to document everything. Now, if we were to document everything, then we probably want to look at the possibility of have everything to be done online. So we can actually, in a very typical things that usually happens in post-contract stage is the request for changes, take for example. So what we can do right here in BuildSpace when it comes to project management in online is to put all this information online, and we can also, when we do request for variation, we can also do a little bit of estimate right here as referring to the BQ that we have. So once it is done, then very quickly we can have an overview on the cost performance in terms of percentage, in terms of proposed RV values, in terms of anticipated contract sum, right before we submit for an online approval. So assuming that this thing has been approved online and can be done quickly, then we can straight away also proceed with the preparation of variation orders that will allow the contractors to actually have a quicker actions to perform their work. So what needs to be done right here is to come into the list that we have, as you might see on the screen here, and to come into the BQ and start to update the amount of work that we have. So what we need to do is just to put in our actual quantities and then change and then start to recall certain information for our review, which has been already uploaded to the system. This is how document can be reserved and retained into client server if we're using BuildSpace to monitor the post-contract stage, rather than having it with different consultants, rather than having it with different staff's computer. It is more consolidated when it comes to managing our documents, targeting or handling different types of work that we can have. So once the VO has been approved, then we also want to talk about how to maintain a record in our progress payment module right here. So as what we can see in the previous session, then our payments can be updated based on a percentage in terms of bill level, or we can actually come into the item level where we can see certain VO's item is already captured in our payment list. The work progress BQ item right here. And the beauty of it, we can actually update our progress based on different ways, say items or amount. So what we have here is a total list of our payments, and then we can straight away proceed with our interim payment certification if we want, with all these details has been captured in one single platform. Okay, so when it comes, so since we talk about payments, and we also want to talk about in the situation where the payment has been updated, we also want to quickly monitor it as what has been defined in APM, monitor our progress in terms of time and productivity based on our actual progress. So the next thing we want to share with you is when, as far as contract administrations is concerned, take for example, the preparation of AI and EI to be retained in the system, we can also issue it in BuildSpace right here. And the one that you see on the right-hand side of the screen, where EOT management is actually required, we can also click and right here, and it'll put in all this information as the basis as for people to access and then to monitor what are the things that has been kept inside the system for a more transparent and also agile project management practice and SOP. And for your information, the workflow that we have seen on the right-hand side on the screen is actually based on PAM form workflow. So all these 28 days, 14 days is actually based on the causes that we got it in PAM form. Okay, so we come to the last part of the discussion that we are looking at. So usually QS will produce a financial report on quarterly basis or as and when required by client. So it can be used as a tool to monitor the overall financial performance of a project and also to identify what are the potential risks that lies ahead in order for the management to take preventive action or even corrective action as early as we can. So therefore, we actually, the team that we have in BuildSpace, we reinvented our entire management dashboard to give you the fresh look. So actually, what we're planning to do is we want to launch this part in Radar. If it's not because of the outbreak of the COVID-19, but today we want to put it up online so that you can actually have a look on our new UI right here. Coming to the landing page that we have. Coming to a landing page that we have, we can actually know what is the project status. Then we will have also in management dashboard, we will get to know the overall amount of investment as compared to cost performances in terms of project listing, in terms of the project by categories of work in the form of chart, or even if with the total cost saving or total cost overrun by work category to be represented in also bar charts at the bottom right there, as you can see. So these are all this information we can get it without needing our consultant or our QS or our project executive to churn out the detail from Excel, because everything is linked inside the system and everything can be updated real time, and anytime that the management will actually come in to this dashboard, then we will be able to see what is the standing of the project that we have. So on the project level, then I also want to share with you that something that me as a QS would definitely die to have is something that will look like this, where we not only we tabulate the budget contracts, the budget amount, contract sum amount, and adjusted amount, but we tabulate it out together with a percentage and also cost for GFN and NFA. Because as we know, the selling price is generated by the cost per GF and NFA. So to know the changes in GF and NFA, then we'll be able to tell the top management and then to also discuss on our marketing strategy for selling the property. So the best part of this whole thing and the logic behind is by the time we produce a BQ, then it has been linked or mapped out to a certain cost plan format that has already been defined by client. So in a way, it is still very flexible, but in a way where by doing this, we will be able to know to give us fair comparison on BQ and also cost plan. So if we want to compare in between two different projects or three different projects by your selection, it can be done by selecting those project name and then we can straight away tabulate it in Excel. So this is very, very useful if you have different subphases under one huge development so that you can actually compare what is the distribution of cost and also your cost per GFA in terms of maybe different design or the cost produced by different consultants in that sense. On a project level, which is more micro, where these are the charts that we can monitor, especially the amount of progress payment that actually went out, prepared, represented by bar chart and also line chart. And also the best part of it is having all these and all this contractual informations to be stored right here without needing us to carry our heavy contract documents around with us during the site meetings and post-contract stage. And last but not least, we also want to take a look at how we can actually import our users from outside the office to give them the authority and also to limit their access to the system to see what are the things they can see and what are the things they are not supposed to read on or amend on. So we let us conclude on this part when the time management is quite good. We're about to come to the last part of the presentation today. We still want to talk about like just in case some of you missed this part of discussion last session. So we used to prepare a lot of things in Excel, even if they are initiative to computerize or digitize certain things, but the most we are doing is still in Excel and to print out and then submission for approval, update data, and then we can start to monitor deviations. But even like last year, the one that we did for one project, then we start to put everything out online, then we can start to see there are actually a lot of benefit. Although it wasn't a real e-tender thing, but from the way that how swift the thing can move on how much value we can make out of time, then it is actually very, very useful in terms of saving the overheads and administration cost, especially reducing the tender documentation fee that will allow more contractors to come in. So likewise, I still want to talk about saying how can we collaborate in cloud, then how do people come in and then put in your data for the entire project. And as a developer, as a client, you get to maintain, you get to retain everything related to your project inside your own server rather than have it in everywhere. Or even if we are a developer, then we tend to have different QS or a different project manager to run different projects. And when we have it, we will let the project information to scattered everywhere in the server rather than in one consolidated place. That's why the reporting always takes time when it comes to putting all these informations together. But hopefully with the system of BuildSpace in place, and it will help us to give you a more straightforward and objective review on what is happening in our projects right here. So we talked about it in also last session, but this time around we want to highlight it to you again. The need for digitalization actually is the entire idea of having this webinar to put out. But in the form of, from a perspective of developers, we want to bring your focus to our excel in environmental and social and governance criteria to engage potential investors. We've been talking to Reda in, I believe, somewhere in January, where we start to plan the whole launching event. Then we've been informed that now the banking institutions is using ESG to evaluate certain developers whether they are about to invest in certain developers or not. So we start to look at the possibilities of how digitalization can actually help each and every one of us in this industry to excel in this ESG criteria. Then maybe in the future, if time allows us, then we might also want to take a look at how possible to have a webinar sessions to talk about ESG. Then that will also let me to do a bit of research and then to talk on this issue with a lot more people. We do have our clients in as the developers, and we start to see how this business unit managers start to put everything and put every people together to produce a more transparent way of working, and then to simplify the work processes. We start to see benefits, and then we start to see some of our clients are starting to reap the benefit of having the system in place. And as a digital strategist, like I say, we'll still talk about how better data management can be done, how to improve data collections, at what we can see from the previous video clips on some of the dashboard that the top management will always want to see during high-level discussion and meetings and reporting sessions. And of course, the last one is on the employee level. Always, we still do care about the executive level to introduce to them something that we can use as being part of the changes that being introduced to us. So likewise, we still want to conclude the entire presentation by this chart. As we always say, the BuildSpace IT philosophy is always want to enable a digital transformation, and then by empowering our users, whether you're top management level or your executive level, and we will all we'll try to empower you in different perspective by providing solutions and a support, a system that will allow us to work from cloud-based. I believe this cloud-based thing, an online thing, will start to have more and more feelings about it, especially during this lockdown period. I suppose this is something that we might also want to take a look at on how to change the way we work. So certain part has been automated, like what we have seen, like tender comparisons and also submissions for approval. Things can no longer need face-to-face meetings or submission in hand. We might want to also streamline this workflow, and eventually we can achieve digital transformation together. So previous session we were talking about BuildSpace Pro, where we use it for BQ preparations and comparisons. But today's discussion is a lot more on how to use the system in a more holistic way from project early stage or tender stage, or even all the way to post-contract stage, and even generate the reports. So in next sessions that we're probably going to have, we will be also talking about from this BuildSpace Pro, from the angle of quantity surveyor and also subcontractors and contractors, on how can we use BQ to relook into the way we work, and how BQ can actually help us when we put it onto the cloud. So let me do a little bit of advertisement right here again. We put this out as part of our CSR. Then the slogan came out from me myself. We want you to try to do your best and let us do the rest. If you're interested in the promotional package, you can always come out to our website and then try to talk to us. Then we'll see how do we put this thing online, then let this thing run for you. So coming out in 21st of April, we still have one session where we'll talk about how to manage your construction contracts by using a BQ. And my service manager Zen will be talking about these issues. And I still see you. I still hope to see you around. And with that, the last thing I need from you right here is to help us to improve. Please scan this QR code and send us the feedback. We will design our feedback form in a way that you can also let us know what are those titles or what are those topics you're interested to hear from us, and we will start to design something out from it. And until we meet next time, and I thank you very much for spending time with me. And please stay safe until we meet next time. So thank you very much, and I hope you find this session enjoyable. I hope you also find the information that we try to put out is relevant to you. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Desmond, for the plenty of food for thought on the subject matter. I hope our participants are well informed on our webinar series on today's topic, how to manage risk in development project at early stage. If you have any more questions, feel free to let us know through our email, or you can also note it down in the feedback form. In order for us to improve ourselves to serve you better, you can scan this QR code to fill in this feedback form. Your kind help is very much appreciated. I will still open the floor if you have any questions to Mr. Desmond or us.
Yeah, we have some questions from the floor. If you want to stay up a little bit, then I'll just read out the questions right here. We have questions saying, can the BQ generated from a system to be converted into Excel or PDF format, since it is unlikely to all tenderers have subscribed to the same system? Okay, now the system able to convert BQ into Excel and PDF format, of course, but like just now when we take a look, like just now what we have seen in the video, right? If let's say tenderers and contractors are being invited to be part of the system during tender stage, right? There is this BQ editor where it is actually free for use to be sent out by contractors. But if let's say contractor wants to build out their rate, then there is another way of doing it. Say we'll be doing it in BuildSpace Prote, for example. Okay, so as far as cost is concerned, when it comes to submitting all these things like what you have seen in the video just now, at the moment it is still possible without needing us to send out in Excel or PDF. Second question that we have is, what is the quality we can compare within the contractor who joined the tender? Now, to have a more competitive tender for participation, since using BuildSpace able to reduce the to reduce and also to waive off the tender documentation fee. But if let's say we want to compare the quality in between tenderers, right? It is pretty much depending on the way we design our technical evaluation criteria. That's why we open up this technical evaluation criteria to clients to set different weightage of score, so that we will have a more objective way to evaluate them. This is number one. The second one is, since the quality of tenderers is pretty much being reflected by their project background, and then sometimes we can also make certain document submission mandatory for us to do evaluation based on their submissions and the capabilities. Now, PTE and cost plan, which one comes first? Okay, cost plan will always come first. As what you can see from the system just now, as to compare for cost plan and PTE, of course, cost plan will always come first. In fact, what BuildSpace is trying to look into the possibility is, how do we open up another functions or territory for our user to prepare a cost plan. But PTE will be done. Usually, PTE will be done right after we push out the tender, and then QS will only start to do their PTE. What has been discussed in earlier presentation just now is what we try to see and explore how possible if we're going to do PTE during the moment that we start to do our BQ, and then start to have at least an amount or at least some indicative figures before we push out for tender. So this question, for this question, we always, my answer is always a cost claim will come in later, but PTE will come late. Cost claim will come earlier, then PTE will come later. Sorry. Now, questions number 4, we have mismatch in BQ quantities and tender drawing, which takes precedent. Well, that depends on the contractual arrangements that we have. That will also talk about what is the conditions that we have discussed with our contractors, especially sometimes along the way when we in the tender interview, then halfway through we decide to convert it to lump sum. So that will pretty much tie down to the contractual agreement, or also the form of contract that we're using. So I hope this answers your questions. On Q5, since the timeline for EOT claim assessment is currently based on PAM form, possible the timeline can be adjusted by project creator according to other form. Okay, so currently for BuildSpace EOT claim, right, it is still pretty much on PAM itself, but we are looking at the enhancement on how to open it up, and then based on different types of form. If you have this one, then you can actually write to us in detail, then we start to follow up with you, and then to start to look into how can we put it onto the system for when it comes to implementations. Now, how many projects in private sector have been done through e-tender at the moment? Well, how many projects in private sector have been done through e-tender at the moment? Oh, I don't have this kind of statistics, but they are clients who have been together with us for 2 years already, like one of the very renowned developers that almost most of the projects they are having in their company is using e-tender. But if we come back to this question saying how many projects in private sector, to be honest, I won't be able to give you the statistics, but I will try my best to find out for you. But the only thing I know is since 2001, they are people start to use it for JKR 2001. That is what I encounter when I do my research, but it doesn't really tell us the numbers of the projects in private sector. The one that we tried to dig last year, it is a project in Kuantan. This was instructed by our project manager in Singapore, because the client is actually in Singapore. The project is in Kuantan, and we as a QS we located in Puchong. So we had to resort to sort of online tender practices because of the geographical issues. Then it wasn't a full e-tender thing, but it's an online tender practice to me. So yeah. Any more questions you want to ask? We still have, wow, we're still at 88 persons online. Thank you for staying with me. And yeah, I got my friends here. You say top 10, our top of our top 10 is sales. Yes, we do agree with that one. We might want to give my colleagues a little bit of time then to consolidate some of the questions from you. Then
If you have any more questions, feel free to let us know through our email. Once again, thank you for your participation, and I hope that we can see each other again on our next session, which is next Tuesday, on the topic how to use Cloud BQ to manage your constructions contract. So with that, I think that's all for today. Thank you again, everyone. So please be safe and stay healthy. Yeah.
Please give us the feedback form. Thank you. We want to hear from you. And so bye bye everyone. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you.